Andrew Amayo, international business tutor and creative writer. Today, he's our guest. This is Alex and the Message. Hello everyone, welcome today to Alex and the Message. With me I have another interesting guest as always. With me I have senior lecturer from Birmingham City University, Andrew Amayo, but not only that, he's got much experience in consultancy. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Very fine, thank you for having me here.
Excellent. So the reason why I've asked Andrew to be on, because of his interesting style of teaching, as we've been on a university programme course. Andrew, let's get into it then.
Okay.
So, where were you born?
Right.
What kind of family were you born into?
Right.
And when were you born?
Right. So I'll start with all three.
Okay.
I'm mid-80s, so I'm around about 85 in Nairobi, Kenya is my origin.
Yeah.
To a family of 5 at the time. So I was initially the second born, but my brother passed away, so I'm the second born in a family of 5. That's my origin. That's my origin there.
Okay, yeah. And what was it like growing up in that area?
It was good. It was good. Interestingly, you mentioned when you started about the style of teaching, and I think a lot of that comes from that background, because I never really reflected on where that impact came from.
Okay.
But I think there's a bit of that leads to where my approach to teaching is.
So how would it be different to say, I don't know what you say about a normal tutor, but a normal tutor compared to your background?
Yeah.
How would that sort of...
Well, my approach is actually very, as you've probably seen in class, very interactive,
yes.
highly engaging in terms of, I'd like to embed so much in that gets people involved.
Yes.
Things like games, gamification, the formal or boring version of that. So I have a keen interest in blended learning, online learning, using technology for learning, using games for learning, especially in today's era where you almost have to engage in some of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is that something that was taught to you when you were younger, going through education, or did you pick it up from maybe later on?
Maybe later. Well, it's hard to pick out the actual point when it happened. But I think there's been a progressive view of developing. I'm actually, besides this side, I'm actually, I'd always had an interest in creativity, innovation, doing things differently.
Okay.
Which is also why I'm interested in doing a podcast and then participating in this.
That I'm very grateful for.
So I've always had a keen interest in this side of things, rather than, yes, you have to appreciate the traditional views, but also see how far else can we push this.
Agreed.
Yes.
So what were some of your influences then? Who would have pushed it that you would have first listened to back in the day?
Okay. Interestingly, it didn't actually always come from the world of education.
Okay.
Now, but I will point this out, which is partly also part of my research interest. One of the views that I can say contributed to my current appreciation of education, if you call it that, was coming from a background where education was the only gateway to the next steps, which is almost back to where my interest in transition design comes from. And there wasn't, say, a welfare state or other pathways where somebody could make a path for themselves in life outside the sphere of education. So education was always taken very seriously, and it's reflected by even the leaders that came out of that region, who were always teachers that became presidents, and therefore the values or traditional value of somebody as an educator was highly, highly appreciated. But also the value of somebody who's creative, somebody who's slightly out there with it, was always appreciated.
Doesn't always fit that mold, it's a bit out there.
Yes. So it always, for example, the people that were oral narrators and were educators in the traditional settings. And that's just going back centuries. This is years and years and years of people having done this. But you still see some of those attributes replicated in modern times today. Yeah. I could ramble on about that for days. So I'm going to stop that one there. Yes.
I'm sure when we get the comments going, there'll be shouts for number 2. Anyway,
yes. But yes, that's what led to, because the other thing I'll say is I don't think I ever had a distinct intention to become a tutor or a lecturer or join education until much later on.
So what were your ambitions then as a young man?
So actually my first, and I think there's some correlation here with some of what your aspirations are. My first actual, what I call a proper interaction with the world of work was actually in the creative sector, but it was more in print design and working with organizations that wanted solutions in that orientation. And then going into, what I now call the world of global governance, for lack of a better word. So I did work with organizations that gave loans and grants to countries that wanted to do bits of development work, if you call it that. And then slowly after that, went into global shipping and logistics work.
Interesting, that's where I'm going into right
yes,
now.
That's what I was pointing out, so there's a correlation there, which also is partly my interest in teaching operations, management, logistics and shipping, which forms part of what I teach in international management. And later on, actually went to do more on employability and reflection, which is what I probably have spent since 2011 working on. Okay. So despite whatever I do in the formal environment in terms of formal teaching, there's always been that other side, or one leg in helping people make transitions throughout their sort of professional journeys, if you call it, which is still a key passion of mine.
So what's been some of the things that you've seen over the years to do with employability that stand out, as in, if you could say something now to a listener who's trying to get employed, or a student, or even maybe not a student, what's something that you've picked up on from your experience?
Well, there's so much. Actually, the word I'd use is dynamic, and there's never been a point where it has stayed the same. And there were changes consistently, the skills that are being demanded, the new ones that are being created, technology that changes the roles of, even, say, recruiters even, or the roles of the employees changing. New subject areas that didn't exist before that are coming up. So there's always been that dynamic view that nobody could ever stay doing the same thing. And therefore an appreciation that we have to keep investing in ourselves. And there's never really a point when it's all complete. It's always keep going.
Always keep going,
keep
improving.
Yes. And employability sometimes is treated as a buzzword, and it was at some point a very big buzzword, partly to do with, the competition between universities, etc. But also it's something that is bigger, particularly if you move from employability to employment. Which again is published in different terms, but it's always going to be a prevailing narrative between every sector, every institution, every country, every region that wants or has some interest in this area.
I spoke to a lecturer from Wolverhampton who's almost getting his PhD. He will be soon, Dr. Thomas Magendi, and he started out in Zimbabwe, part-time welder at the age of 8. And he said that one thing he noticed about students in the UK compared to, he said, Africans in general, is that the work ethic is so much greater because they understand where they come from, whereas UK students are almost like they feel entitled, but they're not doing anything with it. When really, like I said, it's the key to most things like education. You can go so far with it. What would be your thoughts if I said that UK students might not put in as much effort because they just feel they almost deserve it?
Oh, it's a very loaded question.
Very loaded.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a bit polarizing because on one aspect, I will say I might not want to generalize because I've definitely seen extremes from both ends of the spectrum. There might be something, and again, it might be my research mind speaking here, which is why I don't generalize, but it is hard to point out there are too many individuals that make this an exception rather than the rule. Because there is something to be said from those who may have come from backgrounds that push them. Adversity,
Yes.
mother of invention. Those who've actually come from backgrounds where they've had to make something from themselves.
Yes.
Not necessarily regional background influence, but mainly those who literally just had some sort of motivation to make things happen.
Yes.
And whatever pot we draw from, it might drive us. And sometimes it might be positive, sometimes it might be negative. There might be the carrot or the stick
Yes.
that's pushing somebody forward. But I've definitely seen performance or work ethic that is variated in those groupings within themselves. So it's hard to say. Yes.
Well, it was a tough question,
Yes,
do you know
yes,
what I mean?
yes.
It's more like an
Yeah.
instinct, but
Yes.
just throw it out there, see what happened.
That's good, yeah.
But yeah, that was just one thing you touched up on. So let's talk about outside of work then. So we've established yourself as a very good professional and educator. Outside of work, what would you say you get up to in terms of? Is it all about developing skills for workplace, or what would you like to do when you're not at work?
Okay. Well, I do some of that, particularly in a voluntary capacity, and actually, interestingly, mostly in Africa, or what I call EMEA markets. So I've done, interestingly, travel is one of them.
Okay.
So, but with travel, I've done bits and work with people doing similar, or at least with similar interests in India, parts of Europe, but mainly in Africa. But I also enjoy a bit of creative writing or the arts, something I should do more on, to be honest, if I do get that balance right.
For the listeners, I've just seen a certain spark in his eye there when you mentioned creative writing.
Yes, because...
what's your experience with it?
Well, I have, from a very, very young age, been involved with publications or writing for publications and poetry and prose. Yes, for a very, very long time.
Have you got a favourite poet?
Not with me here,
Oh, yeah.
but I actually blog on it, which I should do more. But I do have... this is really taking me back. But I did publish poetry, and it was actually presented to a German museum.
Wow.
I was very young, actually. That was the first hint where I thought, I could actually do something more with this.
Can you remember, even just roughly, what was the poem maybe about?
Oh, I don't know. It was...
Or was that
It
too
was
far
something
back?
where I don't remember the actual words, but I remember I had used animals as symbols for something else. That's as far as I remember. I think that's been buried in years of many other things.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd probably like to do much more of that. That's the one thing I said I should do much more of.
What would you write about? Or
Anything.
Poet about?
Everything. I could write about doing a podcast. It literally comes out. It's one of those things where somebody say it's almost like a bad habit.
A bad habit?
Yes, because or a bad behavior. Put it this way: I was once sitting an exam and finished early so that I could write a poem.
You were that into it?
Yes. Or draw, because that's the other thing. I did the creative arts, painting, drawing, up to a very, some would say almost post university level. So I still enjoy a bit of that, although to be quite honest, I've not spent too much time delving back into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, I could see that from your presentation style when we were in teaching sessions. You can definitely get a sense that this is a guy who might do something creative. Do you know what I mean? But poetry and drawing,
yes. That's where it draws from, I think, because I am.
Oh, I see.
I am. They say no pun, all fun. Yeah. I am that way inclined. I think I have an appreciation for the creative sides. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, can we expect any new publication soon from yourself in terms of poetry?
Yes. Do you know what? I have put. I have been challenged to do it, and there's even challenged, and I like that there's actually even a date to it. So there will be something coming out. Fiction, I'd call it.
Fiction.
Yes. So there'll be works of fiction. Because the other thing with the world or the broad world of academia is we work a lot on, and I should choose my words carefully here. Proper or research-oriented work.
Very
so
laser beam focused.
Yes. Okay. So, and you're expected to publish, and you will publish inevitably in that area. But I through that, have been challenged to do more on my creative side.
Okay, so more of a balance is...
Yes. And to be honest, it's not really writing, because I can tell you right now, as I sit with, I have tons that I've written. I've just not done anything with it. Yeah.
I swear that's something that Stephen King, very famous author, said that if you're going to be a writer, just write.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be some stuff that doesn't even get used, but just write, get it down.
I totally agree with that. This is
definitely going into your creative realm here.
Yeah.
So what sort of things would you write about?
And it's actually, because I tried to theme them the other day. I tried to sit down and think, is there a pattern to this? And the sad or true reality is there isn't. I literally write, and it's not something I plan to do. And a lot of it is done spur of the moment because I've seen a word or I've seen something.
That's very interesting.
And it just comes out.
That's interesting, because I tried stand-up comedy for the first time probably about a month ago now.
Okay.
And it went quite well.
Okay.
But once you do a creative process like that,
yes.
it changes your thinking when you're not doing it.
Yes.
You become something, a creative something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You see things like you said, a word, and it sparks something inside.
Yes. Well, I like the idea that you did a stand-up. That's big. Yeah. That is so big. In fact, I'm almost going to turn this around to you, because I'm thinking, what made you do that?
Well, to be fair, what it was I've recently just graduated from university, as I'm sure the listeners will know by now. I've banged on about it enough. And thankfully I've got a job with an excellent company, so I'm very grateful for that. Also, I want to make the most of life. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's a finite time. The only thing for certain, other than change, what we've mentioned in the course, is unfortunately passing. So do what you can with the time that you got.
Yes.
And so I've always been a fan of stand-up. Chris Rock, I saw him live, amazing.
Was that when you came to Birmingham?
Yes, when you came to Birmingham.
I actually was there.
Oh, you were there?
I went for that show.
No.
Yes.
World.
Very small world.
Small world.
Yes.
Do you remember the joke that he said about Handsworth? He says
yes, because he started. Yes. He went on about that actually, and then there were people in the crowd. I remember when he said Handsworth, and he, in his Chris Rock way, literally keeps just saying the word.
Yes,
and it becomes all humorous.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I won't go into too much, because if people haven't seen it, I think the show was called Tambourine.
Yes.
And it's on Netflix now.
Yes,
if you listen to this, I'm surprised you haven't heard of Chris Rock already. But he had one joke about Handsworth, and it was that the people of Handsworth, when they saw him drive by in the car, were like cavemen saying, "Oh my gosh, it's a wheel."
Yes.
And the crowd went crazy.
Yes.
It was brilliant night.
It was.
But I got into stand-up because of that. It's just a fun thing to do. And I think expression is very important for people.
Yes.
I think especially more so for people who are in positions where, as you had to be with in your role, publications, it's very laser beam focused. I'm a similar way of thinking. My new role, in fact, I want to be achieving the absolute best that I can. Yeah. And so to express something else creatively is key to having a balance, like you said. Yes.
It certainly is.
So let's go back to your writing, because this is really interesting, man. I didn't imagine we'd go into this topic. So you've been challenged. Can I ask, how do you get challenged in writing?
Well, I'd like to say, a wealth of good people, I should say. Networks who know, as you say, not everyone knows this sides to a person, for example. But I did at some point churn out some stuff and then became lazy, is the honest truth. And somebody just came back and said, "Why don't we hear from you anymore? You should." And in that view, I said, "Well, I will." Yeah. And it actually was as simple as that. Because, as I said, it's not something I think or find hard to do. And there was a point where I wrote at least 2 pieces a day.
That's a lot, that is. I've been writing jokes for stand-up, and even just trying to write 5 minutes of jokes, it's tough. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So 2 pieces is a lot.
Yes. And I'm not saying they're perfect. They're probably far from it. And they're barely ever complete. But it's only the realization when I went back to organizing them that I found this is quite a lot. This is something I could do something with. Yes. And that's the only reason. That's the only reason. I should probably go back to when or what spurred this, because that'll probably answer a few bits.
Okay.
There was an author back in Kenya called Wahome Mutai,
Wahome
Mutai, and he wrote an article in the newspaper, and it was nothing like any other author wrote at the time, which was very symbolic. For example, where he called his wife the investment, and it called it
I don't know if she took that.
And it was based on humor, pure humor, but it was very based on deep symbolism and just lots of humor. And at the time, we were meant to actually be writing creative writing for school, but it was one of those things where it inspired me to write in a way that was non quote unquote proper for school.
Yeah.
But then it's sort of leading from that way back to where I am now, where I've just immersed tons of content.
Yes.
That's all that is.
I think that's I was watching some advice show from some comedians, something on YouTube like that, and I don't know if you heard of George Carlin.
Yes, sir. George Carlin, of course. One of the greats, actually.
Yes. It's pretty good,
yeah.
He mentioned how important it is for a comedian, and I guess anyone creative, to file their ideas. Like file them, have them away. If you're going to do a joke about women, have one. If it's about your job, have one. Just different files. Do you know what I mean? Very important, because anyone who's starting the creative process will see like ideas can just fly everywhere, and you need to, if they're probably good ideas, but you need to keep them organised. Yeah,
definitely, I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So that was one of your inspirations growing up back in the day.
Yes.
Okay, that's good then. So when can we expect some work then? I mean, the date today is the 7th of September. This is probably going to go out in about 5 weeks' time, something like that. So can I hold you accountable to something?
Oh, yes, you will. Yes, you will. I'll be very specific, and I'll tell you it is as soon as soon. It is that specific.
But couldn't be more specific. There we go. Sorted.
Yeah.
Well then, so got any? Say you got some good people around you. Do they write? Do they influence you?
Yes and no. Actually, one of them does write, but is more of a good critic, if you put it that way.
Okay.
A good critic, because sometimes you need a bit of that.
Yeah.
I have been involved in writing groups. That's the other thing. I was a member of the Poetic Society in London. I was in Coventry in the Coventry Live Poets group, and they've always had critics in that. But I think you sometimes need that just as a prod to sort of get things going.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one of my other hats and interests outside of here. Yeah.
So that's just one interest. It's a shame we can't go on for longer because there's many hats, as you said.
Yeah.
Just quickly then, before we get into a few semi-philosophical questions.
Okay.
What are some of the hats? Just reel them off.
Oh, there's so many.
Here we go. So we've got creative writing. We've done that. We should have been longer, but yeah.
Creative writing is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yes.
But also outside academia and research, which is, two hats within themselves.
Yes.
I'm also involved with a lot of professional bodies in I'd say professional capacity, but it's almost outside the world of work anyway. But it does feed in to that practitioner view of education. Yeah. So I'm always getting a hat into networking with sort of the world of business, or even supporting social enterprise, particularly in those markets that I've mentioned, in the wider, and even at the likes of Oman, so it's Middle East, India, Africa at this moment. People that want to make some social change by doing business, or that sort of thing. I've also, obviously, with that hat, also had some board positions, roles where I've occupied and supported organizations to do that. And outside of creative writing and painting and drawing and the arts, painting and drawing, yes.
Would you paint?
Again, it's a bit of everything. It's a bit of everything and anything.
Okay.
But I had a teacher that inspired that. I think that I probably draw my types of painting from my teacher in art, and that's what I don't think I've actually explored anything beyond what I was taught. Is what that was. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. And an Arsenal supporter in terms of football, as as the last cup of that.
I would say shout out Arsenal, but they're not my team. United, but it's not going well.
No. It's probably enough said on that for now.
I was going to say, we haven't got enough time for that yet. Now we'll leave it. All right. Well, it's a shame you can't be on for longer, but as I said, we're going to these philosophical questions. That can be the answers can be as long as you want or as short as you like.
Okay.
So number one, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Ooh, now this is good. And I'm glad you said philosophical, because that's another interest of mine. I'm quite a good follower, reader of the broad world of philosophy. In fact, I have a group that we talk on nothing. It's almost, there's a view of what they used to call Plato's symposium, which was a banquet where people came together and talked about philosophical thoughts, as it were.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the things I was working on was something around that area. But in that view, there's a discussion about the contributions of the likes of Nietzsche, I think, who was famous for a quote called Amor Fati, I think it was, love for one's fate, as it were, or embracing your own fate, which meant that your 20-year-old or 10-year-old self would just be told that, your fate or your purpose is almost before you.
So it's like already mapped out, like?
Yes, and if I was to tell them, I'll just say, carry on. carry on. Yes, yeah.
Simple message to the point.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good answer. All right, number two then. Mm-hmm. What brings you the most joy in life?
Oh, now that is a difficult one.
Mm-hmm.
That is what they usually have quoted in olden times, $1 million, isn't it? It's $1 million.
Doesn't have to be one thing, could be many things, could be a collection of things.
Yeah, they call that the pursuit of happiness, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then others say you shouldn't pursue happiness. Yeah, going philosophical again. I don't know. It's one of the most recent ones has actually been seeing people I've worked with succeed.
Yes, that's quite a common answer I get, actually, success.
Yeah. So it's through the actions or whatever I've done, and I've been fortunate enough to see this. For example, especially with what we just started talking about at the beginning, in employability, where somebody says, well, that bit helped me here, or I'm now here, or I've changed this.
Yeah, of course.
That's always...
Because you've been a catalyst for that, haven't
you? Yes. Simple things as well. Coffee. Makes me happy. You'd be amazed how much coffee I drink. But yes, it's small things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know, just...
Interesting that you say small things, because I often talk to some of my friends, and it's like the big things are really just sort of these ideas that are just there, sort of like, I don't know, a family event, etc.
Yes.
Small things, if you can get them right, then every little sort of 10 minutes of your day is going smooth,
I agree. And I think that's generally true of myself and a few others. We are called the happy chappies anyway. So we do find happiness within, and I always argue against the view of happiness as a destination. It is within, and it's actually, if I was going to contextualize it, it is a brave choice. That's what happiness is.
Now this is getting good. Okay, expand on this. Want a bit more.
And I'm not the originator of that quotation. I think I forget who actually said it first. But happiness, particularly in uncertain or unhappy times, is a brave choice. And most of happiness is choice. And it's not something that people who have an outer locus of control think happiness is something that happens to you, and not necessarily something you create or something that you choose, even when choosing something else might be easier.
So it's more of a mindset.
It is.
Just be a happy person. I remember
it is.
I was I was at a comedy show, one of the first ones at the Hollybush in Cradley Heath. So shout out if anyone from there's listening. But it was an interesting first act. It was someone who was Elvis, but as a US Army guard or something. Okay. And out there, very out there. And he said that the aim of his act was to have people become people and turn them into laughers. No matter what the situation, they can laugh at it. And I thought, that is very deep for such a out there act.
That is. And I have a deep appreciation for comedians. Because one of the things we miss out on in what they call creative economy now is how intelligent you must be to be a comedian.
They're some of the sharpest people I've met.
They really usually are. And also, as you say, quite brave in, again, the reality of the times that we sometimes in, it makes it difficult to laugh or smile and whatever. And then you combine the intelligence and that brave approach to actually make that happen. I believe it's very admirable.
Again, another quality answer. Jeez, this is brilliant. Only half an hour long, sorted. And for the final one, very final question. Assuming we don't know who the listener is, what would be your final message?
Ooh, assuming we don't know who the listener is. Now, this applies to everyone because it's a very generic answer, but it's something I believe in.
You can change it. You could even say, "Oh, I want my mate to do well tonight." It could be any message you want. It could be to anyone.
Hey, I do want that actually, but I also want everyone to just chase their purpose and find happiness within it.
Oh dear, chase your purpose.
Chase it. Actually, don't even chase it. It's you are there anyway. So yeah, just be happy with it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. I wish we could have had longer. I'm sure we're going to get a few comments because there's so many avenues we could have explored there. But again, time has got the best of us. Thank you for coming on.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. You've been an excellent guest.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
You have been listening to Alex and the Message. If you stayed to the end, please drop a like, leave a comment and subscribe for weekly uploads. For regular updates, you can also follow me on social media, firstly on Twitter as AATM and also on Instagram as AlexAndTheMessage. Thanks for listening and have a great day.